Hi, welcome back. So today I'm here with my October wrap-up. And guys, this month has been a little bit crazy, so I haven't done as many other review videos as I normally would do. So get yourself a drink, get a snack, settle in. This is gonna be a long one. I know some of you are really into that, so enjoy. If you are new to my wrap-ups, welcome. I always start out by talking about my stats for the month, and then I get into the books, and I do start with my lowest rated books and then move up to my highest rated books. I do tend to read a lot, which is why this is going to be a long wrap-up. Please, I try to say this periodically, but don't feel pressured to read as much as I do because I'm just sort of crazy and read quickly. For those of you who are wondering how I read as much as I do, I actually do have a video talking about it, so I will link that up above because I've had a few people asking questions about how they could read more books or read more quickly, and so I will link that video, go check it out. The main thing I would add to that now is audiobooks. This month has been a month with a lot of audiobooks because I've been really busy with my kids, and that has been a big part of my reading. So without further ado, let's get into my stats for the month. This month I read 27 things. This does include a couple of novellas and collections of short stories. All in all, including the audiobooks, I read 9,871 pages, which is actually a lot. I think that might be up from September. Let me look at September. Yeah, it is up. In September, I read about 8,600 pages, so this month I read about 1,000 more, and I think that is probably thanks to audiobooks. This month I listened to 7 audiobooks. 5 of those were from my library, and those are the only library things that I read this month. I had so much else on my plate, I just didn't have time to get to any of my physical library books, unfortunately, but the audio really kept me going, and I had some really good audiobooks. The other 2 were from Audible because I got a deal where if I joined, I could get 2 books for free for the first month, and I was like, yes, let me take that up. So I am for now an Audible subscriber. We'll see how long that lasts, but I am really enjoying it. It's been good, and audio is becoming a part of my reading. And I just want to say, I have gotten a few comments here and there saying, oh, well, that's not really reading, you don't get points for that. And guys, number one, that is like a fairly ableist thing to say because there are people who cannot physically read books and you're still consuming the book even through an audiobook, so I disagree. But secondly, like, this is for fun. This isn't about points. Like, that's not why I'm doing it. And I enjoy consuming books physically, in audio, in ebook. I kind of do a mix of them, whatever works for my lifestyle, and I think whatever works for your lifestyle and that you enjoy, read books however you want. So that's my spiel. If you don't like audiobooks, that's fine. Don't listen to audiobooks. I mean, I obviously do a big mix. So I read 27 things, 7 of them were audiobooks. Like, I'm not gonna feel bad about that. So, yeah. Okay, moving on. This month I read 6 arcs. I read 3 books by indie authors, and I participated, I think, in like 3 readathons. I apologize, I did TBRs for a couple of them that I never wrapped up. It's been a crazy month. I'm just probably not gonna get to them. So I will try to mention when I get to the books that I read for readathons that I read it for a readathon. I'll try to remember to do that. But yeah, guys, October was a busy, kind of crazy month, more than I had anticipated. In terms of the age breakdown, this month I read 13 books that were targeted at an adult audience, I read 2 middle grade books, and I read 12 YA books. So, pretty good breakdown. Genre, I read a lot of fantasy this month. It is probably my favorite genre, so that was gonna happen. I read 13 books that were fantasy this month. I read 2 historical fiction. I read some horror, which I don't usually read much of, but given that it was October, I read 4 horror books. I read a couple of literary fiction, a couple science fiction, 1 thriller, and 3 romance. So there you go, there's my genre breakdown. I guess I didn't have any nonfiction this month, but November I'll have plenty, so that'll make up for it. 2 other quick orders of business before we get into the books. Number 1, I last month made a video all about how I review books, which I will link up above, and in the comments somebody suggested something that I thought was a really great idea, so this is something I'm officially adopting from here on out, and her recommendation was that since I have a range of books that I will give 5 stars to, books that I just thought were really good and deserve 5 stars versus books that knocked it out of the park and I would give them more stars because they're favorites of the year, favorites of all time. her recommendation was that for my own purposes, for these wrap-ups and for maybe my spreadsheets, that I add a 6th star for some of my all-time favorite books. And I thought that was a great idea. So I am doing that. I went through my spreadsheet of all of the books that I read so far this year. I added 6 stars. And so that will now be something that you'll be seeing in my wrap-ups. This month I did not have any 6-star reads. So putting that out there now. But thank you. I can't remember who it was who suggested that, but if you're watching, thank you. I thought that was a fantastic idea. So I will be doing that. Other order of business. I'm getting over a cold. We will see how my voice lasts. I will do my best. Okay, in terms of breakdown this month, I had 2 books that I rated 2.5 stars. I had 8 books that I rated 3.5 stars. So there were a lot of books that were like, meh, fine, good, not bad, or not great, but not amazing. I did have 6 4-star reads, I had 4 4.5-star reads, and I had 7 5-star reads. And like I said, I did not have any 6-star reads, so none of these are going to be favorites of the year, but there were some really great books. So let's start at the lowest and work our way up. Okay, so this first one is a book that I actually read for the Booktober readathon, hosted by Derby Lane Reads, and this book was a bit of an experiment for me. I was given this book by the author to check out, which I really appreciate. Thank you so much to her, and I learned a lot through reading this. I think it's a well-written book. I just think, okay, well, let me tell you what it's about. So it is The Last Wolf by Maria Vale, and this is a paranormal shifter romance. And I think I learned a lot in here about what does and doesn't work for me in terms of romance. So this was an experiment. It is not a genre that I read widely in, and so while for me this was a like 2.5-star read, I do think this is going to work really well for some other people. This book would have worked better for me as a fantasy novel. I think the strength here is that she does a really great job of building this super interesting world for the wolves, and I like some of the things she does with it. I like that there can be female alphas. I like that the story is not focused on an alpha figure, that it's focused on the runt of the pack. It's got an interesting kind of story. I liked the world building. I liked kind of the culture she creates. I thought that was fascinating. But as a romance, this just didn't work super well for me, and I think it's because it's all through the perspective of this main character who is basically a werewolf, but she is much more wolf than she is human. And so her cultural practices, her thoughts about sexuality, all of these things are very distinctly non-human, and I just had a hard time connecting with that in terms of the romance. Personal preference. Like I said, I think I would have probably really loved this as a fantasy where it was more focused on the world and some of the other things she's trying to do here, but in terms of the romance, which is what this is, it wasn't my favorite. So this was 2.5 stars, but I think for people who like that sort of thing, I think this could be really great. The next book that I rated 2.5 stars was one that I actually listened to on audio, but I'm going to show you the physical book. And this was a disappointment, guys. I really thought I was going to like this book, and it just was like, not my cup of tea. This is My Plain Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is book 2 in the Lady Janie series. It is like a very loose, funny, supposedly funny retelling of Jane Eyre. Book 1 was My Lady Jane, which I really did like. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was funny. I enjoyed it. And I assumed, because I love Jane Eyre, that I would like this. I've heard a lot of people rave about it, and I think I can see why some people love it. It just didn't work so well for me. Like I said, it's a very loose retelling of Jane Eyre where Jane Eyre can see ghosts. The premise, I think, is fun, but it got a little convoluted for me. Charlotte Bronte, the author of Jane Eyre, is a character in here, and they like are at school together, and I just didn't love that. I didn't love her whole side plot, and I see where they were going with it. I think there were some really funny and clever moments in here, but overall, I just wasn't that into it. I do really like Jody Meadows. She's written some other great stuff, but yeah, unfortunately this one fell a little bit flat for me, but I see why some people have been loving it. Great, next let's move on to my 3.5 star books. And so these are books that I thought were good, not amazing, and for various reasons. So let's just talk about it. The first one was actually the first book that I read, and I was really disappointed with this. I thought I was gonna love this book. I bought the book because I love the cover, and I don't think I'm gonna keep it in my collection because I just didn't. It was okay. Okay, let's talk about this. So this is Beneath the Citadel by Destiny Soria. I love the cover. I love the cover, guys. It's so pretty. And in theory, this sounds so great, right? It's this interesting world. It's YA fantasy with a diverse cast of characters and queer representation, and it's set in this world where everything is run by prophecy, but the council and the government controls the prophecy and is corrupt, and the premise is really cool, and there were things that I loved about this, but it just didn't meet my expectations. Let's chat a little bit about it. I thought the world was really interesting. I thought the plot was pretty strong in general. However, my two big complaints were, number one, there were too many perspectives in this book. There are 5 point of view characters, and I felt like the story could have been told with fewer perspectives, and I felt like it caused the characters to be underdeveloped, so I just thought it was too much. I wish that she had cut down and maybe had like 3 point of view characters instead of 5. It was kind of a lot, and I don't think it was necessary. I think it detracted from what she could have done here. The second thing about it was I didn't love the romance. Part of what's been so hyped about this book is the fact that there is LGBTQ representation. There is a asexual character, there is a bisexual character, there's a gay character, there's like a love triangle sort of with one of the bisexual guy who had been with a girl but now he's interested in this other guy. I don't know, there's like all this stuff. So in theory that's great. The problem with it was it didn't feel authentic to the story. It felt like it was something that was just kind of thrown in on top. There were a couple of scenes that I liked that I thought were sweet and romantic. Most of it, I was like, we're in life or death situations. Why are we stopping to talk about this? I don't know. I didn't love it. It didn't work for me. I have seen YA fantasy where there is queer romance that's done really well. I would recommend, if you're looking for that, Reign of the Fallen by Sarah Glenn Marsh does it really well. I didn't love it, unfortunately. Also, this is like kind of a pet peeve of mine. I feel like I talked about this in another video, but it annoyed me. It's this fantasy world, which I want to be like engrossed in that fantasy world. And it annoys me when authors then use modern terms that don't make sense for that world. So in terms of the sexuality, she'd be like, she was asexual, he was bisexual. And I'm like, but why can't we just explain, like, she wasn't romantically attracted to anybody, he was like girls and boys. Why are it jolted me out of the story and out of the world, and I didn't love that. So I know I'm not the only one to feel this way. Some people might not care. It bothered me. So unfortunately this one was 3.5 stars. I was hoping it was going to be a 5-star read. I would have predicted it would be 5 stars. It was fine. Like, there were good things about it, but yeah. My next 3.5 star read was this kind of odd little book that I read for the Books in the Freezer readathon, where it was all about reading horror. And this is Scribe by Allison Haggie. It just came out, and it is a pretty short little novella that is based on Appalachian folklore. It is interesting. I think the writing is good, and there were things I liked about it, but I couldn't decide how I felt about it. It's got kind of this dreamlike quality. There is a lot of like violence and kind of weird things that happen, so I think I put some content warnings on my Goodreads review if you want to check that out. I don't even know how to describe this book to you guys, but if you like sort of strange but beautifully written books, maybe go check it out. So yeah, that was an interesting one. My next 3.5 star read was a romance novel, and I had been really wanting to pick up some books by this author, so I gave her a try. This was Wicked and the Wallflower by Sarah McLean. It is historical romance, and it was good. It was fine. It took me a while to get into it. Like, I've had this on my TBR for a while, and it was just kind of slow going. And I liked it. I didn't love it. And I don't know what it is, because I feel like I should love this. It's funny sometimes. It's quite overtly feminist. It's about kind of this wallflower spinster woman in Victorian England, and this guy who was the bastard son of a duke who's involved in the underworld but has a good heart. And it was good. It was fine. She does lockpicking, which is kind of cool. I guess I can't put my finger on what it is exactly, because I feel like I should have really, really loved it, and I just kind of liked it. I can't really tell you why, but this is adult romance. It has, like, you know, explicit sex in it and whatever. But, yeah, 3.5 stars. She's not my favorite author. I like what she's doing, and I feel like I should be more into it than I am. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know if you've read much by her and how you feel about it. I'm curious. My next 3.5 star read was another one that I read for the Books in the Freezer readathon. This is The Dark Deep by Ali Condi and Brendan Reichs. This is a middle grade horror novel, and I liked it. I thought it was good. It's about a group of friends who discover this mysterious island where weird things are happening, and it's about, like, friendship and facing your fears, and yeah, it's good. I just didn't have, like, super strong feelings about it. It's the beginning of a series. I think it would make a cool TV show, maybe a creepy, super creepy TV show, but yeah, it was, like, this is the problem with books that are 3.5 stars. I don't always have that much to say about them. Like, unless it was because they were disappointing and there were things that were done excellently and things that were done not so well. Books like this, like, it was good. I just, maybe not the most memorable. I don't have that much to say about it. It makes it hard. I do recommend it if you want, like, a creepy middle grade book. The next one was a e-arc that I had out from NetGalley. This is called The Ren Hunt by Mary Watson. My throat, guys, sorry. The Ren Hunt by Mary Watson. I'll put a picture here because I don't have the physical copy of it. If I haven't said it yet, I do review all my books on Goodreads, so if you want to hear any more of my thoughts on any of these, go read my reviews, because sometimes, especially the ones that aren't super memorable, that might be a better place to go. The Ren Hunt is this very atmospheric YA fantasy set in Ireland and deeply linked to Irish mythology. It's got magic in it. I'm gonna read a little bit from my Goodreads review. A bit clunky to start, it eventually sucks you in, becoming a tale full of tension with some horror thriller elements and a forbidden romance. Yeah, so Ren is an augur. She's part of this secret magical group, and they have mortal enemies that are the judges, and she goes undercover to infiltrate them, and I don't know, a lot of stuff happens. There's a forbidden romance, there's some magic. It turns into kind of a horror thriller book, but it's clunky and slow to start. So 3.5 stars. It was like, I'm curious to see more from the author. I think it's the first thing that she's written that's been published in America, so it'll be interesting to see where her work goes. It's kind of a mix of fantasy thriller, I guess, which is interesting. The next one was another book that I read for the epicOctober readathon. This is Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendara Blake, and this is a YA ghost story and romance. And I liked it. It was really slow at the beginning. Like, the first third of it, I was like, okay, I'm not that into this. And then once you meet Anna, who's the ghost because she's dressed in blood, then it really starts to pick up, and I got really into it. So I ended up landing on 3.5 stars with this one. I don't know if I'll read book 2, maybe. I will say this is very gory and gruesome for a YA, for sure. So this is like YA ghost story horror with some, like, fairly gruesome elements. The romance was like, meh, whatever. I didn't care that much about it, but I did think Anna's story was really interesting. I liked it as a ghost story. I think it's a good one for this time of year. I just wish she had, like, gotten to the point earlier. This might have been one of her first books that she wrote, and I've read later books by her that I really loved, which is why I'm going back to her backlist. And it was good. It was, like, I'm glad I read it. It was good for the time, but it wasn't amazing. Like, I probably won't reread it, and I'm not sure if I'll read book 2. I do have book 2, so I might. We'll see. Maybe. Sorry guys, I know this is just like a super long one, and I'm like in the middle of the 3.5 star ones, which are like, I'm just not that excited about them. Okay, the next one was another e-arc that I had from NetGalley, and okay, this might be controversial because I've been hearing a lot of really great things about this book, and I didn't think it was a bad book, but I read Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa, and in terms of plot and characters, it was fine. Like, it wasn't bad. It read a little bit young. It is one that I would definitely recommend for younger teenagers, and I think they'll probably enjoy it. I think me 10 years ago probably would have been all about it. The big thing that I think it really has going for it that I loved about it is that it is very deeply rooted in Japanese mythology and culture, and that I think is very cool. It is YA fantasy, Japanese inspired, and it really digs into all these interesting mythological things that I didn't know much about in terms of spirits and ghosts and demons, and there's lots of adventure in it. I think it's really fun. It is sort of a traveling adventure quest type novel, so there are two main characters, and then along the way they sort of pick up a band of companions, and while there is the bigger plot arc, there's sort of like mini sort of serialized adventures along the way, and it is the beginning of a trilogy. So I liked it. I think it was pretty well done. The characters were fine. I didn't have really strong feelings about them. Like I said, the thing that I loved the most about this was how much it's rooted in this Japanese mythology and culture, and so I think that is fantastic. I think it's a good book. It's definitely one that I would recommend for younger teens. I think older ones might enjoy it too, but it reads a little bit on the younger end, I thought. So yeah, that was Shadow of the Fox. I know some people have been really, really raving about it, and I didn't think it was a bad book, but didn't quite hit that high for me. My final 3.5 star read was another one that I was really hoping was going to be better. I actually listened to this on audio, but I do have the physical book, so I will show it to you. This is A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This is book 2 in the Shades of Magic series, and I liked it. I think it really has middle book syndrome. I loved A Darker Shade of Magic, which was book 1. This one has weird pacing. I love the world that she's creating with the different Londons. This one just is so strange. The first 2/3 of the book is pretty slow in pace. Not a lot happens. It was still good. It was still interesting. You're getting more character development. I thought there was too much of it. I thought it could have been shortened, but it was, you know, it was fine. And then the final third of the book, it's all happening around this competition, and all of a sudden it's really fast-paced, it's really action-packed, very compelling. Yeah, and then it ends on a cliffhanger. So I'm very excited to get to book 3. I have a feeling I'm gonna love book 3, but this one was just 3.5 stars for me. I'm glad I read it. I like the world, but I think it's got some pacing issues. I really like Rye's character in this book. I think he is very interesting and complex, and I like that we're seeing different sides of him. I would probably read a novella or a book just about Rye. I think that would be fascinating, so who knows, maybe we'll get that one day. But yeah, so that was A Gathering of Shadows. So it was good. Not amazing, but I have a feeling that book 3 in the series is gonna blow me away, so it'll be fun. Alright, so there you go. That is all of my 3.5 star reads. Moving on to 4 stars. Finally. So the first book is one that I had a physical book of, although I unhauled it and sent it off to a friend. I listened to this one on audio from my library. This is one that I read for the Books in the Freezer readathon, so it was YA horror. It is called The Killing Jar by Jennifer Bosworth. I really enjoyed this. I thought the audiobook was really good. It is not too scary. It's like a lighter YA horror with some supernatural elements to it. I don't want to say too much about it, but I'll show you a picture of it. Read my review if you want to hear more details, but I did really like it. I know it was only 4 stars. It didn't like knock it out of the park for me, but I did think it was really good. It was creepy, it was super interesting, and I liked the mythology and the backstory that you get, so I thought it was like a really good horror light if you're looking for that. My next 4 star read was a buddy read that I did with Krista over at Books and Jams. This is A Shadow Bright and Burning by Jessica Cluess. I'm so happy I finally got around to reading this. It's been like a year since I bought it, and I finally read it. This is book 1 in a YA fantasy series, and I think book 3 just came out recently. I have book 2. I think I have an arc of book 2 somewhere. So I really liked this. I thought it was fun. Fantasy is one of my favorite genres, so I don't... Kid and the babysitter are playing in the other room, so if things are noisy and you hear banging on the wall, apologies, that's why. I just really enjoyed this. I don't know that it did anything totally novel, but if you like YA fantasy, it's fun. It plays a little bit with some tropes of the chosen one. So this girl, people think that she fulfills this prophecy where she's the chosen one who's gonna save the world, but she knows that she probably actually isn't. And it deals with some interesting issues in terms of like class and gender, and is definitely like anti-patriarchy. So there are a lot of things to love about this. Is it the most inventive, unique plot or world ever? No, probably not, but I think it pulls stuff together in really interesting ways. I think it's very well written. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a quick, easy read, and I would definitely continue on with the series. I liked the characters. There's a guy that we were saying we think feels a bit like a Mr. Darcy type figure, and I suspect that in the next book that might play out. So there are some loose links to Pride and Prejudice in here. I don't know, it's fun. I liked it, so yeah, 4 stars. My next 4-star read was a book that I also read, I think for the Books in the Freezer, also for the Books in the Freezer readathon. So this is Sleepy Hollow and Other Short Stories by Washington Irving, and I really liked this. It's an interesting collection. I love this book. It came in an owl crate a year ago, and it's so pretty, so I'm happy I finally read it. I figured I could get a little more classic literature into my life, and yeah, it was a nice collection. I think I can see why some people aren't so into this. The spook factor is very light, and it's not the main part of this. This is very sort of classic literary writing, so it's very descriptive. If you enjoy that, if you can kind of fall into that, where it describes these worlds of small town early America or small town rural England for the various stories that he has, I think you'll like it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Some people are going to find it really boring. If you're looking for something more akin to the movie adaptations of Sleepy Hollow, I mean, yeah, they make it much more creepy and much more, they add a lot to the story, I guess is what I'm saying. But if you want something that's like very light on the creep horror factor, this is a nice collection. And actually, one of the long stories at the end is not even a creepy story at all. It's about Christmas, but I liked it. It was fun, so yeah. That was good. My next 4-star read was another buddy read. Lauren over at the Novel Lush is hosting a read-along of this series. This is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. We will be reading the 2nd book in the series in November, and this was 4 stars. Her world building is amazing. I can't decide like why this wasn't 5 stars for me. I mean, I know part of why. I can't decide why it's not 4.5 stars is really what I'm saying. Like, I know there's one specific thing that brought it down for me from what might have been a 5-star read, but there's something about it, like I like it, but I don't love it as much as I expected to. I do think it's an incredibly inventive world. Her world building is super interesting. It's very action-packed, and I had assumed it's like a mix of sci-fi fantasy. It's set like 50 years in the future, but assuming a different history for Earth. So assuming that 200 years ago we had an alternate historical direction, this is set given that 50 years in our future. So it's kind of got a blend of genres, which is interesting. You do really get thrown into the world without much explanation at all, and so that makes it a little bit slow to get into. I would very much recommend, as boring as it might sound, reading the glossary at the back of the book. I found it to be very helpful, and also look at the charts and the maps in the front of the book. It will help you wrap your head around this world and what's going on in here much faster. So expect it to be a little bit slow going. I would not recommend doing this on audiobook, at least for the first one, until you kind of wrap your head around the world, because you need to be flipping back and forth to like figure stuff out with the terminology and the different types of people, and the magic system is pretty complex. So it's very well done, but know where you're getting yourself into. I'm curious to see how I feel about book 2. So I feel like that's going to kind of decide my feelings maybe on the series. We'll see. But I think it's an impressive work. One issue that I did have with it that I know I might be in the minority on, because some people really like this, I didn't, is a spoiler. So I'm going to put my hand up. If you don't want to hear the spoiler, don't listen until I put my hand down. So the thing that I didn't like about this is there is a romance that develops at the end of the book, and it's sort of this like captive-captor dynamic, which I don't like because of the power imbalance, and I think she tried to do as good a job with it as she could, but it still rubbed me the wrong way, and I didn't like it, and I think it's unhealthy. So yeah, that was my feeling on that. Okay, so there we go. That is all my thoughts on the Bone Season. Let me know what you guys think and how you feel about book 2. I'm curious to see how the rest of the series goes for me. My next 4-star read is a novella from an indie author who sent it to me to check out. This is The Huntress and the Nightingale by Amara Luciano. I talk a little bit more in depth about this book in my roundup of books by indie authors, which I will link up above if you want to go hear about it. But in a nutshell, it is a dark fantasy novella, and it is a gender-bent retelling of Snow White and the Huntsman. It's really good. I really, really enjoyed it. So go check out that video if you want to hear more of my thoughts. Also, apologies. This might literally be my longest wrap-up ever because I haven't had time to do other collections of book reviews, but what are you gonna do? Okay, moving on. Do I have more 4-star reads? I think I do. Okay, I have one more 4-star read, and this was another audiobook. It was Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare and other people. I enjoyed it. I think if you are a fan of the series and you want more content, it's great. It is the collection of short stories that follows Simon Lewis at the Shadowhunter Academy. So this takes place in between the end of the Mortal Instruments and the, I can't think of it right now, but the current book series in the Shadowhunter world that she's writing. I like the world. I like the characters. I like the series. I enjoyed it. It was 4 stars. It wasn't amazing. Do you need to read it? No, but it's fun and it answers some questions and explains some things that are peripheral to the main plots of the story. But if you like the world, I would recommend it. I think it's fun. Moving on to my 4.5-star reads. I have another audiobook, but I also have it in physical, and I'm happy I finally got to this. This was another book that I read for the Books in the Freezer readathon. This is World War Z by Max Brooks, an oral history of the zombie war. I was such a fan of this, guys. I really liked it. I can see why it's not a book for everybody. It wasn't really what I was expecting. There was a movie based on this. I still haven't seen it. I should see it at some point, but I know it's very different. The movie, I think they made more of like an action movie. If you're looking for that, that is not what you're gonna get, but I think this is brilliant. It is written as if it's a series of interviews from key players around the world, 10 years, I think 10 or 16 years, after the end of the world zombie war, where this virus turned people into zombies, and it follows what happened with the outbreak, the different responses across the world in terms of political response in different countries, and it has some anecdotes too of personal experiences, and it does have some bits that are a little bit action-y. But if you're looking for like a super action-packed zombie book, that's not what this is. I think this is really, really interesting if you want to go into sort of the brain game, if you will, of what might occur politically across the world if something like this actually happened. It feels very real. It's brilliantly done. It's very on point. I liked it. The audiobook is fantastic as well. It's got a full cast, so each of the individual people being interviewed have different voice actors. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. I was a fan. My next 4.5-star read, I'm happy I finally got to. This is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. It is adult historical romance. I loved it. It's so good. I definitely want to read more from Tessa Dare. She's so funny. I laughed out loud, definitely a lot at this, and it's fun. These are nice books. I enjoy putting them in between some of my heavier reads because they're just like candy, I guess. But yeah, it was really funny. It is about a duke who's been disfigured through war, but he needs an heir. So he randomly marries this girl who was a vicar's daughter and now works as a seamstress, and basically makes a deal with her that like, you get pregnant, have the baby, and then we don't need to have anything else to do with each other, and I'll just get you a house in the country, the end. And she agrees, but demands that they have dinner together every night and have conversation, and of course, you know, romance ends up developing. So I really liked this. I thought it was really sweet. I liked the characters. I thought it was very funny. I will definitely be reading more from Tessa Dare. 4.5 stars is about the highest that I have rated any romance books this year, so it's a really good one. My next 4.5-star read is another book by an indie author that I talk about in that video that I linked earlier, where I did a roundup of all of the indie books that I read this month. This is The Blue Witch by Elaine Adams, and it is a really wonderful middle grade fantasy book about friendship and magic and deciding who you want to be, and yeah, I definitely recommend it. I loved it, so thank you so much. I did receive this for review, but it is available now for purchase, so I would definitely recommend it. Hi guys, so this is Bethany from the future. I realized after I had already finished editing this video, so I'm going to go back and insert this clip, that I somehow forgot to include a book that I really liked on my spreadsheet, and therefore it didn't end up in my stats or in this video. So there was one other arc that I read, and it was another YA horror book. This is The Nightingale by Amy Lukovics, and it was really good. So this was a 4.5-star read for me. I call this feminist horror with some sci-fi
elements to it. It is set in the 1950s, and it follows a girl across a dual timeline where in the present day she's been committed to a kind of weird, creepy asylum. And then we go back to her past where we see what happened that led up to that and the expectations that her family has of her as a young woman living in the 1950s, and that her boyfriend, who she doesn't really like all that much, has of her. And it just gets really creepy and super weird. And there's probably some content warnings, so go check out my Goodreads review if you want to hear more about it. But I did really, really love it. So I think if you are interested in getting kind of a blend of horror and sci-fi with like a feminist twist, and there's also some degree of queer representation later on in the book as well. Yeah, it was pretty good. I definitely liked it, and I wanted to talk about it, so I was kind of bummed when I realized, oh shoot, I never talked about that book. So back to previous Bethany.
And my final 4.5 star read is one that I thought I was gonna like more than I did. I did like it, but okay, this is God's Grave by J. Kristoff. This is book 2 in the Nevernight Chronicles. So remember I was talking about 6-star reads? Nevernight is a 6-star read. It's gonna be one of my favorites of the year. I loved it. God's Grave, I still liked. I love J. Kristoff's writing. I think he's so funny. I think his world building is really smart. So I still give this 4.5 stars. However, there were 2 things that made it not a 5 or 6 star read for me. The first one is purely personal preference. Book 1 took place mostly in a school, which I love. It's one of my favorite tropes. This is mostly involving these sort of Roman-inspired gladiator battles. And for what it is, I think it's well written. It's just not my favorite thing to read. So it was fine. Like, I think he did a good job of it. It's just personally not my favorite trope. So if you're into that, it's really well done. I'm not that into it, so I didn't love that. The other thing is a spoiler, so I'm putting my hand up. If you don't want to hear, don't listen. There is a romantic relationship that develops in this book between Mia and Ash. I was not about it. Not because I have a problem with Mia being bisexual, but because Ash killed her first love. And Mia is nothing if not a grudge holder. So it felt very out of character to me. I will feel better about it if in book 3 it turns out that Mia was just seducing her for revenge purposes. That would make more sense to me, but I was like, no, why? Anyway, yeah, so there's that. Content warnings on these books. They are adult fantasy, very, very adult. They are very bloody. They have explicit sex scenes in them. Know what you're getting into, but I do really love the series. I'm very excited for book 3, and I'm so sad I have to wait a year. Okay, and finally, 5-star reads. Finally, this is so exciting. Okay, so the first 5-star read is one that I actually did a complete individual review of, so you can go check that out. I will link it up above. This is Damsel by Alana K. Arnold. I've talked about this a few other places, I feel like, but I would call this feminist horror dressed up like fantasy. There are definitely content warnings for this. I loved it. I think it's worth talking about. Go check out my review. Yeah, if you want to know more. My next 5-star read, I'm so happy I finally got around to. This is Vicious by Victoria Schwab. Yeah, it's great. I need to read Vengeful. Like, I feel like so many people have talked about this book already. Like, what can I say? So it's about these 2 sort of narcissistic guys, Victor and Eli, who are college roommates studying medicine, and they start experimenting with this idea that if you have a near-death experience, you might gain powers. And they do. And what happens when narcissistic men gain powers? And it's told in alternating timelines, so you get a bit of their past, and you get the present 10 years later, and it is quite interesting and bloody. It's an interesting character study of anti-heroes and villains, and yeah, I was definitely into it, so 5 stars. Next up was another book that I listened to on audio, even though I actually have an arc of it, but it is a chunker. So this is The Iron Flower by Laurie Forrest. It is book 2 in the Black Witch Chronicles. It's a sequel to The Black Witch. This is a controversial series, and I really love it. I think it's doing important work, and I will link the video up above where I talk about the Black Witch, because this is already such a long video, I don't want to get into it here, but she tackles racism and inequality and social injustice through the perspective of a character who has grown up in a very racist family, basically, but it's in a fantasy world, so I really like it. I liked this too. I think I liked book 1 more a little bit, but I still give this one 5 stars. So yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes, and I will definitely be reading the next book, but it is really long. The audio is really good also. We're like slowly getting through this, guys. My voice, I'm losing my voice here, so hopefully we'll be done soon. Okay, the next book was my final indie book that I read this month. It is Disintegration by J.E. Perazzi. It was 5 stars. Book 1 in the series she sent me to read, and it was 4 stars. I really liked it. This one, she just took it up a whole nother level. I do talk about it in my indie recommendations video. It is adult dystopian sci-fi, and it's really good. The characters are good, the action is good, the pacing is fantastic. It's top quality if you want a good indie author in that genre. Then I had one other audiobook. I think this is my last one. Yeah. Last audiobook of the month was The Queen of Atolia. This is book 2 in the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner. I've been listening to these on audio, and I really liked it. It was 5 stars. I think book 1 was like 4 stars, 4.5 stars maybe. This was great. This one is much more heavy on the political intrigue, and it's got really interesting female characters. And it was written a while ago, before that was a thing that people were usually doing in fantasy, so I thought it was really impressive, and I very much enjoyed it, and I am continuing with the series. I'm on a waiting list. I think I actually just downloaded the 3rd book, so I will be listening to that in November. Okay, we're almost done. 2 more books to go. The first one was a book that was sent to me actually by Harlequin for an Instagram promotion. Guys, I loved it. This is one of the best historical fiction books I've read this year, and I would call it creepy light. It's so good. This is The Witch of Willow Hall by Hester Fox. It's historical fiction with a paranormal element, so it's got some creepy stuff going on, and with some romance. Perfect for fall. Perfect if you want something that gets creepy but never outright scary, and has kind of a dark romance. This gave me Bronte Sisters vibes. Really liked it, except it's set in rural Massachusetts in the 1800s. I don't want to say much more about it, but yeah, I highly recommend this one, guys. It was so good. I really, really liked it. The final book that I read this month was an arc that I got to after having had it on my TBR a couple of times. This is The Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rossner. And actually, I'm trying to remember. I know I read both of these for some of the readathons. I just can't remember which ones. It's been a while. I should have done wrap-ups for them. I did the Books in the Freezer readathon. I did this Booktober readathon. Both of them were great. I do have a vlog of week 1 of Books in the Freezer. I will link that up above. I had some footage for week 2, and Comic-Con happened, and it's been a busy month, guys. Okay, so Sisters of the Winter Wood. This is adult fantasy set in Eastern Europe. I really loved it. I thought it was beautifully done. I would recommend this for people who liked Naomi Novik's Spinning Silver. It has a lot of similarities. I would also recommend this for people who thought that Spinning Silver had too many points of view and too complicated of a plot. This only has 2 points of view, and the plot is more straightforward. So if you like the idea of that, I would check this out. It's not exactly the same, but has a lot of similarities. Both of them include female protagonists who are Jewish young women living in Eastern Europe, and involves magic. So this is about 2 sisters who are Jewish, and there's some interesting family secrets. It involves magic, and the thing that I thought was really interesting about it is it's 2 perspectives. So Libba is one of the sisters. All of her stuff is written in prose, and then the other sister's perspective, Laya, is all written in verse. And so I liked it. I thought it differentiated them interestingly. I thought it was done really well. I gave it 5 stars, so I definitely recommend this, and the cover is also beautiful. So, all right, that was a long video. Thank you for all of you who made it through. Talk to me in the comments down below, any of your thoughts about these books. Question of the day, let me know which of these books would you be most excited to pick up. I'm curious to find out. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.